She certainly thought she was standing up for the bank's values, but her decision cost her more than she could imagine. What happens when the man she dismissed returns with a shocking revelation? Stay tuned to see how one mistake changes everything. Never underestimate simplicity. Sometimes, the most unassuming people hold the greatest strength. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories. Thanks. Let's start the story. The morning sun filtered through the glass walls of the bank, casting long beams of light across the tiled floor. The air hummed softly with the routine rhythm of financial transactions, the gentle rustle of papers, the clicking of keyboards, and the low murmur of voices discussing loans and deposits. Starkville Community Bank had always prided itself on orderliness, and this Tuesday morning was no different. Employees moved with precision, their polished shoes echoing lightly against the floor as they greeted customers with professional smiles. At the center of it all stood Laura Peterson, the bank's newly appointed branch manager. Laura was a woman of unwavering confidence. In her mid-40s, with neatly tied blonde hair and a sharp navy blazer, she exuded authority. She was known for her meticulous nature and strict adherence to policy. A woman who thrived on rules and structure. Her reputation for running a tight ship preceded her, and she had earned the respect and, in some cases, the fear of her staff. Laura believed in maintaining a controlled environment where every detail mattered, and today, as she observed her team from her glass-walled office, she was satisfied with how smoothly things were running. She glanced at the clock. It was just past 10 a.m., and the bank's morning crowd was beginning to thin. Everything seemed to be in its place, until the doors swung open and a man walked in. Laura's gaze instinctively flicked toward the entrance, her managerial instincts kicking in. The man who entered was in his late 50s, tall and sturdy, with silver streaks in his neatly combed hair. He wore a pair of worn jeans, a faded plaid shirt, and on his head sat a bright red MAGA hat, emblazoned with the words, "Make America Great Again." Laura's demeanor shifted almost imperceptibly, her lips pressing into a thin line. She watched as the man moved with an air of quiet confidence, his posture relaxed but purposeful. He carried no briefcase or stack of documents, just himself and that glaringly recognizable hat. For Laura, it wasn't just a hat. It was a symbol, one that ignited a firestorm of thoughts and emotions. To her, it represented division, intolerance, and everything she found contrary to the values of inclusivity she believed her bank should uphold. James Donovan approached the counter, unaware of the storm brewing in Laura's mind. He was here for a simple task, one he had done countless times before at other banks. His face bore the calm expression of someone accustomed to efficiency. As he waited in line, he looked around, his eyes taking in the polished surfaces and the employees bustling about. His demeanor was polite, his movements unhurried, and he greeted those around him with a nod. When his turn came, James stepped up to the counter and offered a warm smile to the teller, who seemed slightly hesitant under Laura's watchful eye. Before the teller could even speak, Laura moved swiftly from her office, her heels clicking with authority. She intercepted the interaction with a practiced air of control. "Good morning," James said pleasantly, tipping his hat slightly in greeting. Laura's gaze lingered on the red cap for a moment too long. "Good morning," she replied, her tone professional but clipped. She positioned herself directly in front of James, her posture straight and unwavering. The tension in the room became palpable as the staff exchanged uneasy glances. James, sensing the shift, raised an eyebrow but remained calm. He had no idea that his simple choice of headwear had turned him into an unwitting focal point of Laura's judgment. For her, the day was no longer ordinary. It was a test, a moment to uphold her standards, even if it meant stepping beyond her role. James, however, wasn't here for conflict. He was just a man looking to open an account. As he pulled out a piece of paper with his information, his calmness contrasted starkly with the unease brewing in Laura's chest. The stage was set, the quiet of the morning giving way to a silent storm that only one of them saw coming. The moment James Donovan stepped up to Laura Peterson's desk, her eyes locked on the bold red MAGA hat perched on his head. It wasn't just a piece of clothing to her. It was a symbol, one that carried all the weight of her personal convictions. She didn't see a polite man in his late 50s dressed casually and ready to handle his banking. Instead, her mind jumped to assumptions, judgments forming faster than she could stop them. As James set down his paperwork and smiled, Laura felt her composure tighten. "Good morning," James said warmly, sliding the forms toward her. "I'd like to open a new account, if that's all right." Laura's gaze flicked to the papers but didn't linger. Her tone sharpened, her polished professionalism giving way to a clipped edge. "Are you aware of our bank's policies, sir?" James blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I've been banking here for years," he said, his voice steady but curious. "I didn't realize there was anything I needed to be concerned about." Laura folded her hands neatly on the desk, her posture rigid. "We prioritize creating an inclusive and comfortable environment for all our customers. Certain attire, like that hat, it can be perceived as offensive." James's polite demeanor wavered slightly, confusion creasing his brow. "It's just a hat," he said, his voice calm but firmer now. "I'm here to open an account, not to start a debate." Laura's tone turned icy. "Sir, we reserve the right to refuse service if a customer's appearance or behavior creates discomfort for others." The air in the bank shifted, growing heavier with each word she spoke. Employees behind the counter exchanged uneasy glances, and a few customers in line stole quick looks at James and Laura, whispering among themselves. James, however, stood his ground, his expression growing resolute. Let me get this straight," he said, his voice carrying a hint of steel. "You're refusing to serve me because of my hat? A hat that represents my beliefs?" Laura straightened in her chair, her chin tilting upward. "It's not about your beliefs, sir. It's about maintaining a welcoming environment. Your hat is divisive, and I won't allow it to disrupt the peace in this bank." James stared at her for a moment, his eyes narrowing. He had dealt with many people in his life, and while he prided himself on remaining calm under pressure, Laura's condescending tone tested his patience. "You do realize this is discrimination, right?" he said, his voice quiet but cutting. "You're making assumptions about me based on what I'm wearing." Laura's professional mask remained firmly in place. "I'm simply enforcing policy," she said, her voice cold. "If you have an issue with it, you're welcome to take it up with the bank's corporate office, but for now I'm going to have to ask you to leave." James's jaw tightened, and for the first time his voice took on an edge. I've been a loyal customer of this bank for years. I've never caused a problem, and I'm not causing one now. The only issue here is your bias." The room seemed to hold its breath. Employees stopped typing, their hands hovering over keyboards. Customers froze mid-conversation, their curiosity now fully captured by the growing confrontation. The quiet hum of the bank had given way to an oppressive silence, broken only by the low murmur of whispers. Laura, sensing the eyes on her, made a show of authority. "Security," she called, her voice sharp and clear. "Please escort this gentleman out." The security guard, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus, hesitated. He had been watching the exchange from the corner of the room, and while he was accustomed to handling difficult situations, this one felt different. He glanced at James, whose calm but stern expression seemed to hold its own weight, then back at Laura, whose authority demanded action. "Sir," Marcus said, stepping forward, his voice careful, "I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." James didn't move at first. He stood still, his eyes locked on Laura. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly. His tone wasn't confrontational. It was a warning, heavy with meaning. Laura's response was swift and dismissive. "Absolutely," she said. "We don't tolerate behavior or attire that goes against our values." James let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head slightly. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice steady but firm. "One that's going to cost you more than you realize." With that, he turned and walked toward the door. Marcus followed closely, unsure of how to feel about the whole exchange. As James reached the exit, he paused, glancing back at Laura one last time. "You will regret this," he said, his voice calm but cutting through the silence like a blade. Then he stepped outside, the door closing softly behind him. The room remained still, the weight of James's words lingering like an unspoken question. Employees exchanged nervous glances, and customers resumed their activities with a newfound awkwardness. Laura, trying to regain control, straightened her papers and spoke briskly. "Back to work, everyone." But even as the bank returned to its routine, the tension remained. James's departure wasn't just an exit. It was the beginning of something far more significant. And deep down, Laura felt a flicker of doubt, one she quickly pushed aside. For now, she believed she had done the right thing, but she had no idea just how wrong she was. The morning air in the bank was alive with the buzz of whispers and furtive glances exchanged between employees. Yesterday's confrontation between Laura Peterson and James Donovan had left an impression, though no one dared to openly discuss it. Some staff members felt uneasy, their own unspoken doubts about how Laura had handled the situation nagging at them. Others were simply curious about the aftermath, speculating on whether the man in the MAGA hat would lodge a formal complaint. Laura arrived precisely at 9 a.m., her heels clicking against the polished floor with her usual authority. She strode past the murmuring staff, her posture as sharp as her tailored blazer. She wasn't one to dwell on yesterday's events, at least that's what she told herself. To her, the matter was resolved, a minor hiccup in an otherwise smooth operation. As she settled at her desk, she noticed the staff avoiding eye contact. Her lips tightened, but she dismissed it, assuming they were just reluctant to face her usual scrutiny. By noon, the bank's routine was disrupted. The double doors swung open, and a group of sharply dressed individuals entered. Their presence was impossible to ignore. Polished shoes, crisp suits, and an air of authority that immediately commanded attention. Conversations halted, and every eye in the room followed their movements as they approached Laura's desk. "Miss Peterson," one of the men said, his tone polite but firm, "we're here to meet with James Donovan." Laura blinked, caught off guard. The name sounded familiar, but it took her a moment to connect it to the man from the day before. Her confusion deepened. "Mr. Donovan," she repeated, her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. "I'm not sure I understand. Who are you?" "We're part of his executive team," the man replied. "He's expecting us. Could you direct us to a meeting room?" Laura hesitated, her professional instincts kicking in as she gestured toward the conference room at the back of the bank. "Right this way," she said, her mind scrambling to piece together what was happening. She had assumed James was just another customer. Nothing about his casual demeanor or attire had suggested otherwise. As the group settled in the meeting room, Laura returned to her desk, her confusion mounting. She was still trying to process the request when the doors to the bank opened again. This time, it was James Donovan who walked in, but he was unrecognizable from the day before. Gone were the faded jeans and the MAGA hat. James now wore an impeccably tailored suit, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor. He moved with a quiet confidence, his calm demeanor carrying an air of authority that seemed to shift the energy in the room. Heads turned as he walked past, his presence commanding attention without a single word. Laura's heart sank. The realization hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just a disgruntled customer returning to settle a score. This man was someone important, someone with power, and she had underestimated him entirely. James didn't look at her as he walked toward the conference room, his focus unwavering. Laura sat frozen at her desk, her confidence wavering as dread began to creep in. Minutes later, Laura was summoned to the meeting room. She walked in, her usual assertiveness replaced by a nervous energy she struggled to hide. James sat at the head of the table, flanked by his team, his expression calm but unreadable. Laura hesitated for a moment before taking a seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Miss Peterson," James began, his voice steady but carrying an edge of authority. "Allow me to properly introduce myself. I'm James Donovan, the owner of this bank." The words hung in the air, each one landing like a blow. Laura felt the blood drain from her face as the weight of her mistake settled over her. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. James gave her no time to recover. "Yesterday," he continued, "I came here as a customer. I wanted to see how this branch operates, how my staff treats the people who walk through those doors. What I witnessed was deeply concerning." Laura's heart raced. She struggled to maintain her composure, but the calm, measured tone of James's voice only amplified her sense of dread. "I know this is horrible. I just don't have the right to say this," she started and then stopped speaking. James raised a hand, cutting her off. "This isn't about who I am," he said firmly. "It's about how you handled the situation. You made assumptions based on appearances. You allowed your personal biases to cloud your judgment. And in doing so, you failed to uphold the values of this institution." Laura felt the room close in around her. Her mind raced, searching for a defense, but James wasn't finished. "Our customers come here expecting respect, professionalism, and fairness," he continued. "What you demonstrated yesterday was none of those things. Instead, you chose to enforce an unwritten policy based on your own prejudices, embarrassing yourself and jeopardizing the reputation of this bank." The room was silent, the tension palpable. Laura could feel the eyes of James's team on her, their expressions unreadable but undoubtedly judgmental. She wanted to defend herself, to explain her actions, but the weight of James's words left her speechless. "Miss Peterson," James said, his tone softening slightly but still firm, "I believe in giving people opportunities to learn and grow. But what happened yesterday cannot be ignored. We'll discuss the consequences of your actions shortly. For now, I suggest you reflect on what it means to represent this institution." With that, James stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Laura remained in her seat, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to process what had just happened. The man she had dismissed so easily had turned out to be her ultimate boss, and her poor judgment had placed her career on the line. As the door closed behind James and his team, Laura sat in silence, the realization of her actions sinking in. She had made a mistake, a big one, and she knew that whatever came next, it would be a direct result of the choices she had made. The tension in the air was palpable as the staff gathered in the main conference room. The usually bustling bank floor was quieter than usual, whispers of speculation circulating among the employees. Every member of the staff had been summoned for this meeting, and no one was entirely sure why. Though the incident with Laura and James the day before lingered heavily in their minds. At the head of the table sat James Donovan, his demeanor calm but commanding. His tailored suit and composed expression gave him an air of authority that silenced even the most curious murmurs. To his right sat Laura Peterson, her usual sharp confidence replaced by a visible unease. Her posture was stiff, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. When everyone was seated, James began speaking, his voice measured and deliberate. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be here. I've called this meeting to address an issue that directly impacts the values and reputation of this institution." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the staff like a heavy blanket. James's gaze swept across the room, making eye contact with several employees before continuing. "Yesterday, I visited this branch, not as the owner of the bank, but as a customer. My goal was simple: to observe how our clients are treated and to understand the culture of this workplace." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "What I witnessed was deeply troubling. A customer, myself, was treated with disrespect and subjected to an unprofessional dismissal. This was not just a lapse in judgment, it was a failure to uphold the very principles this bank stands for." James turned his attention to Laura, who shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Miss Peterson," he said, his tone firm but not unkind, "would you care to explain your actions to the group?" Laura hesitated, her throat dry. She had rehearsed what she might say, but under James's steady gaze and the eyes of her colleagues, the words seemed to elude her. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "Mr. Donovan, I believed I was enforcing a policy that ensured all customers felt comfortable. The hat, it seemed divisive, and I thought addressing it would prevent conflict." James nodded slightly, giving her space to speak but not letting her off the hook. "And do you believe that refusing service to a long-standing customer based on their attire aligns with our values as an institution?" Laura's cheeks flushed. "No, sir," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. James leaned forward slightly, his tone sharpening. "Miss Peterson, our role here is not to impose personal beliefs or make assumptions about our customers. It is to provide them with respect, fairness, and professional service. Yesterday, you failed in all three. Can you acknowledge that?" "Yes, sir," Laura said, her voice trembling. "I see that now." James straightened, addressing the rest of the staff. "This incident is not just about one employee's mistake. It's a reflection of a broader issue, a misunderstanding of what it means to represent this bank. We are here to serve every customer with dignity, regardless of their appearance, beliefs, or background. That is non-negotiable." He turned back to Laura, his tone softening slightly but remaining firm. "Miss Peterson, I believe in second chances, but second chances come with accountability. You have two options. The first is to resign immediately if you feel you cannot align with the values of this institution. Then this is where our professional relationship ends." Laura's face paled, her breath catching as she processed his words. James continued without missing a beat. "The second option is to enroll in an intensive training program focused on customer service, inclusivity, and professionalism. This will not be a checkbox exercise. It will require genuine effort and a willingness to learn. If you choose this path, know that you will be held to the highest standards moving forward." The room was silent, every employee hanging on his words. All eyes turned to Laura, who looked visibly shaken. She hesitated, her hands gripping the edge of the table, before finally speaking. I I choose the training program," she said, her voice wavering. "I want to make this right." James nodded, his expression unreadable. "Very well. Your decision is noted, and I expect nothing less than your full commitment. Understand that this is your one and only chance. There will be no further warnings." "Yes, sir," Laura said, her voice steadying slightly. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity." James addressed the room once more. "Let this serve as a lesson for all of us. We are here to build trust and foster relationships with our clients, not to pass judgment or create division. If anyone has questions or concerns about this incident, my door is open." With that, the meeting concluded. The staff began to disperse, some exchanging glances while others remained silent. Laura lingered for a moment, her thoughts racing. She knew the road ahead would not be easy, but she was determined to prove herself. James watched her leave, his expression thoughtful. He hoped she would take this opportunity to grow, not just as an employee, but as a person. For now, he turned his focus back to the larger task at hand, ensuring that the bank upheld its values, one lesson at a time. Laura Peterson approached the training program with a mix of trepidation and resolve. The initial sessions were humbling, forcing her to confront the biases and assumptions she had carried for years. The workshops, led by experts in inclusivity and customer service, didn't just focus on professional behavior. They challenged Laura to examine her own thought processes and reflect on how they influenced her actions. The exercises were intensive. Role-playing scenarios placed her in the shoes of customers from diverse backgrounds, helping her see the impact of her words and attitudes. Group discussions with other employees opened her eyes to perspectives she had never considered. Laura's growth wasn't immediate, but it was steady. Each session chipped away at the walls she had built around her preconceptions, replacing them with a deeper understanding of empathy and professionalism. James Donovan kept a close eye on her progress, though he didn't interfere. He wanted her transformation to come from within, driven by her own desire to improve rather than external pressure. His leadership set the tone for the entire bank, reinforcing the importance of respect and inclusivity in every interaction. Employees, inspired by James's example, began adapting a more collaborative and supportive culture, which radiated through the organization. Months passed, and Laura's transformation became evident. Her demeanor changed. Gone was the icy, dismissive attitude she had once displayed. She approached customers with warmth and patience, listening to their concerns and finding solutions without judgment. Her colleagues noticed the difference, and her improved interactions began to set a new standard for professionalism within the bank. One afternoon, as Laura assisted a customer with a complex issue, James stood nearby, quietly observing. The customer, an older woman struggling to understand a financial process, left the bank smiling, expressing her gratitude for Laura's kindness and clarity. James felt a sense of pride, not just in Laura's growth, but in the bank as a whole. Later that day, Laura approached James in his office. She hesitated at the door before stepping inside, her expression a mix of gratitude and humility. "Mr. Donovan," she began, her voice steady, "I just wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to change. I realize now how much I needed this, not just for my career, but for myself." James gestured for her to sit, a small smile on his face. "Laura, the fact that you took this opportunity and made something of it speaks volumes. Growth isn't easy, but you've shown that it's possible with the right attitude and effort." Laura nodded, her hands folded in her lap. "I've learned so much, not just about customer service, but about the importance of seeing people for who they are, not what I assume about them. I made a mistake, but I promise I'll keep working to ensure it never happens again." James leaned forward slightly, his tone warm but firm. "Mistakes happen, Laura. What matters is how we respond to them. You've taken responsibility and turned it into an opportunity to grow. That's all I could have hoped for." Under James's continued leadership, the bank thrived. The once routine atmosphere transformed into one of energy and collaboration. Employees felt valued and empowered, which translated into exceptional customer service. Word spread about the bank's welcoming environment, attracting new clients and solidifying its reputation as a pillar of the community. Laura's journey became a source of inspiration within the organization. Her transformation was shared in training sessions for new hires, illustrating the bank's commitment to growth and inclusivity. She herself took on a mentorship role, helping others navigate the challenges of professional development. James often reflected on the incident with Laura as a turning point, not just for her, but for the entire bank. It was a reminder that leadership wasn't about punishment, but about creating opportunities for growth and fostering a culture of respect and fairness. He knew the lessons learned would resonate far beyond the walls of the bank, shaping the organization's future for years to come. As Laura stood in the lobby one evening, watching the busy hum of activity, she felt a deep sense of pride. The bank was thriving, its success a testament to the values James had championed. She glanced over at James, who was speaking with a group of clients, his calm authority evident in every gesture. Their eyes met briefly, and he gave her a nod of approval. Laura smiled, knowing she had earned it. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. She had learned the value of humility, respect, and the power of second chances. And as she turned back to assist another customer, she carried those lessons with her, determined to pay them forward. This story shows how a single moment can transform lives and teach powerful lessons about humility and respect. What would you have done in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've had a similar experience, we'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like, share, and explore more inspiring tales on our channel. Your story could inspire someone today. Comments below where you're watching from, and if you like and love our story, kindly subscribe our channel. Life, inspirational, and motivational tales that explore themes of love, unity, and patriotism. Stay with us always for interesting stories.